All right, thank you. So I spoke about this at the last meeting, and we had some really good discussion about some ideas that we might incorporate. So since then, I have had a telecon with the representatives that we gathered from the other ags, so we at least all have spoken and started to coordinate. It is a lot of, it's only 5 people, but it's a lot of people to try to coordinate among different things. And so like Tim said, it's gone slower than I had hoped. But I do think we've made some progress, and with discussion in this room, at least on the SBAG side, we can start to solidify something to put in for our own goal and suggest as to be parts of a bigger goal, so that we don't have to hold ourselves up waiting for the bigger machine to go, but we can contribute to a larger ag goal and have a say in that. So again, ultimately we want to coordinate across ags because this is something that we can all agree is an important thing, and more unified voice will have more of an impact at NASA and higher up places than just individual uncoordinated messages. And so these are the current representatives from the ags that we have. And like I said, we had our first telecon to talk things through. So these are more thoughts after having gone through that telecon, and then me having thought about this on my own as well, that an ag, and specifically an SBAG diversity goal, it should include some kind of focused and concrete plans. I think if we just have a goal that says we want to be diverse, that's fantastic. And I think we all agree with that, but why bother really putting that out if there's nothing that we can concretely try to do to get there? On the other hand, we can't say we are going to solve the diversity problem, right? Because it's just not something that's going to happen. So I started to think about this in terms of things that the ags themselves, and SBAG in particular, has control over, and that we could do to promote diversity within the group and maybe our own communities. And then some things that the ags could support or advocate for to a higher level or to the broader community to try to promote diversity and workforce issues in just at a bigger level. So some of the things I was thinking about under ag control, I pulled this first statement off of our own website. So we have a description of our steering committee members, and I think the first bullet as to how we decide upon these steering committee members includes a statement that it should be as diverse as the community in terms of both topical interest and demographics and experience and type of employer and other parameters. And I think that's a really great way to phrase that. And we can control as a group who our steering committee members are. And so that's something that we can put out there, we have put out there, and maybe a thing that we suggest to the broader ag group, like, hey, if you don't have a statement like this might be a thing that we consider. As ags as a whole, we should be aware of the makeup of our steering committee, because that's the part of that group that gets the most notice at meetings. And even things such as a broad reminder to, when you're setting up an agenda, take a look at who is presenting all of your different topics to make sure that there's not only a diversity of, like we said, topics of interest for the group, but are you really reaching out to people that may not just stand up and volunteer to get the broadest input to the group? Maybe each meeting needs to have a very short, it doesn't need to be a long drawn out thing, statement or presentation on diversity or the state of the workforce, maybe at the beginning of each ag meeting. And so we don't lose all the people at the end who are all catching their flights. Again, does not have to be the focus of the group, but just something to make it accountable every single time and remind people that this is a thing. What are we going to work on this time? Let's keep these things in mind. And then I'm sure there are bazillions of other ideas that I'd like to hear from you guys, particularly for an SBAG type venue, what things that are easily implementable might we do. Early career support is one of these areas that we can try to, bring in newer perspectives and try not to lose people from the groups of people that sometimes leave the field for different reasons. And so we did compare, and among those 5 ags, all 5 did have some sort of early career travel support, which is fantastic. 3 of the 5, including us, have an early career position on the steering committee. Not all did, and so that I think will be something that the other ags might bring up with their groups to say, is this something that we think we should put into a goal that says for every steering committee, we should have an early career position on there. I think we already have one. I think it's working well. Obviously, the community should weigh in, but something that I would advocate trying to put into some kind of official goal, keep this going. And if the other ags agreed, it might go and come into a higher level goal. And if not, we can proceed and say, this is what SBAG thinks, and not have to wait or disagree with the findings of somebody else. And then if, we can always think about if there are ways to increase early career involvement in the ags. Obviously travel and cost of travel and time is a barrier that we have limited resources to support. But are there other ways that we can either promote the fact that this happens, that this group is here, or to get more early career people involved? One thing I was thinking about is outreach. We are not an EPO organization, but are there things, should we have some sort of role in EPO or reaching out to either lower levels than the people that we're typically reaching out to, again, to try to reach people that may be leaving the fields that would feed into this because they don't have opportunities that come up or because they're scared away for certain reasons. And should the ags have a broader role in outreach within our own community, both advertising our own ags, but involvement in the community and having a voice. As Lucy mentioned, the E got totally cut out of OSIRIS-REx, and that's happening across the whole board. So we don't want to lose sight of the fact that this is an important thing. We can't spin up a multi-million-dollar EPO operation out of the ags, but are there little things that we might do that go into this whole workforce system? So those were some ideas I had, broadly speaking, about what we might have under our particular ag control. I want to pause here to see if there's any questions or discussion points or input people might have now before I move on to kind of a higher level. All right, we solved it. Woo!
Do you think that there should be metrics associated with these, or do we just want to say these are the things that we value and make it up to the community to yell at the steering committee if we aren't living up to it?
Yeah, I think one thing I'd like to decide a little more is how specific to be in these goals document, right? Because you don't want to be so specific that you have to say, we have to see X% increase in early career people in order to whatever. But on the other hand, you have to have something concrete to work towards. And if we do have some ideas as to what might increase diversity or workforce involvement, and there are metrics we could use that could show that it's making a difference.
Lucy Lamb, NASA Goddard. I guess I'm just I haven't thought this all the way through, but if we have a chart about workforce composition on the beginning of every meeting and it doesn't change on a 6-month time scale, people might start to tune that out. I don't know if we should rotate topics, like keep it more...
I don't think it should be the same, like a progress report. Here's how many women we had today. Here's how many people from, liberal arts colleges we had today. I think it would be something that maybe either a person on the steering committee or a small subset of steering committee should make sure a topic of sorts gets on the agenda. And it could be quite a variety, I think, as long as it just is something, we talk about science every time, right? And that's one of our goals. We talk about human exploration every time. It's one of our goals. We don't necessarily talk about the workforce and diversity every time.
Carol Raymond, JPL. So since we are not an advisory group, but an assessment group, I guess we could say we need to assess how well the community is doing diversity-wise. And I think it's important to keep in mind that in addition to quantifiable metrics, which are useful, a lot of times the real problems are hidden beneath the metrics. So thinking about ways to take the pulse of the community in different ways, and I think invite people to talk to the committee and give a more holistic picture of how the small bodies community is doing in meeting the kind of norms that we would hope we can achieve.
I was just actually just thinking on that. I've seen at a couple conferences, I think LPSC, they had like a bystander intervention training. And I wonder if that, I don't know if the problem is people just wouldn't show up, but there could be like a shortened 2-hour or like an hour-long one or something at an SBAG meeting to get parts of the community that might not go to LPSC or AG, where I think those kind of trainings are happening. But that, if we're thinking about items on the agenda, that could be one of the rotating items.
That might also be a good thing to put out in some sort of a survey. If we offered something like this, would you be interested? What types of things would you want to see?
And you could ask how many people have attended.
Mhm.
That would be a great metric already.
Tom Statler, NASA headquarters. So this is another incompletely thought through thought like Lucy's, but outreach to people who are not in the field is almost always done in the sense of outreach to people who are not yet in the field. And one thing that we, and by we I mean every scientific profession and field that I've been associated with, does a very, very bad job of helping or getting useful information from people who are leaving the field or at risk of leaving the field. And we've all been to meetings recently, and we know by seeing it that there are tons of really enthusiastic, talented, energetic, early career scientists. And my concern is that those people turn into equally energetic, happy, formerly early career scientists still working in the field, rather than unhappy, jaded, former early career scientists doing something else.
Or in the field?
And, well, either way. But we tend to take this attitude in the physical sciences that, once you fall off the ship, there's no, you're forgotten about. And if there were a way to turn that around, it would make me happier.
I think this is a great idea, but I'm not sure to measure it, because you tend to go out with a whimper, not a bang. That's, you just don't apply for them. You stop applying for jobs. At
But
some point.
maybe along the way, more reaching out to the
Yeah.
community and surveys or and
Yes,
stuff like
maybe some
that
sort of-
to take the pulse of the people as they are.
Yeah, maybe
going
tied
through
in with the survey about decadal, because if we are thinking about putting something for the decadal, this might be a thing for early career. How often do you think about leaving? How close have you gotten? Are you thinking about leaving in the next couple of years? Are you one more? There has to be some way to measure it, but I think that's a really important point, because usually you go to grad school because you want to do this. Something happens.
Arguably, were we to do that, which is a fine idea, we should not restrict it to early career, because there are also people all along the way who leave or get close to leaving, or
I think you could do a general survey
Yeah.
and maybe take demographics as to who's taking the survey, and that could lead you to different portion. Is there any? There are probably similarities across the board, but very big differences across the board. If you asked a first-year postdoc versus a tenured professor,
I might have a different
what your
opinion than
difficulties
other
might be
people.
or something. So
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go on.
Yeah, no, I agree. We would want to go into it trying to make sure we're not just having a selection effect of we're looking at early career stuff and the other people are just a control group.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So
And then I think also we should just word in a way that it's not bad to leave the field, that people's opinion, what they want to do with their life changes. So you didn't fail, that.
Yes. Yes, and that being said, though, if the answer that keeps coming back is I left the field because I couldn't stand it anymore, that's something that we need to know.
Yeah. Very, very important, true.
Yeah, I want to second that. I think that's a really good idea to ask people about these steps, these small steps that would be indications that you might be leaving the field. I think that's a really good idea. The other thing that I was thinking about is I remember when I was a grad student, Fran Baganal's survey of the field and the demographics of the field came out. And I think that was NSF funded, but I'm not really sure. And I wonder if we're going to make diversity a goal for SBAG and kind of a community level goal, if SBAG would be an appropriate venue to have these surveys, these metrics of the field be a regular thing.
yeah, they do political polls week to week, right? They don't just do one and stop.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there's anything necessarily saying these need to be a, you know, once every 10 years or whatever this giant survey is. You can also do more focused ones. So a big thing like Fran's study maybe can't go as often or something like that, but I think we could take the pulse more often.
One thing I liked about the point about this group is an assessment group. You may be able, asking a lot of questions about how close are you, or how long will it be till you're out of the field. Might also ask what opportunities do you desire that you're not generating for yourself, because although SBAG itself might not have control over these things, a lot of people in this room have control over opportunities and might just not be aware of who to try to give them to. One thing I've found that has been helpful is especially organizing special sessions at meetings. This was brought to my attention about my own personal conduct at one point, was why don't you invite some younger people on to help run panels? One of the things that was most beneficial for me was I met senior members of the field by proposing special sessions and then inviting them as the speakers so that they would know who I was. Soon after that, they ended up being on proposals with me. But a lot of people don't have the courage to do that, or it's an intimidating thing to do. But if you had a list of people who said, well, I would like to be on panels, or I would like to be on whatever it is, whenever one of the people in this room organizes a panel, they could easily look at that list and say, I'm going to invite this person, or I will try, or I'll step aside and invite this person to take my spot. So just maybe try to find out what the opportunities are that people feel like they're missing or they're not being given the opportunity, and then pose it to the community to try to help.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I think there's also a distinction between what opportunities, if you say what opportunities are you not seeing, are they actually out there and you just don't know how to get to them, or that they are there, or do they not exist? Right? Do we have to create new opportunities, or do we have to make sure that it's accessible to everybody?
And I think that's the point, because this is probably more reflection that I haven't probably done as good a job as advocating for this meeting, because I look on who's calling in and there's not a lot of early career folks I know, but I've heard great feedback when early career folks come here. So there's clearly this, a lot of people aren't aware of it. And if your advisor wasn't into it, there's just so many reasons. And when you're a postdoc, you're just desperately trying to get a job that doesn't end in a year. So like calling into SBAG isn't going to be the top of your priority because it doesn't have a job in it. And so I think there also needs to be a way of maybe how we communicate about SBAG to the community. Currently I have a list on a Word document to remember to post on this group and this group, but I don't always do it on time, and just something that we can make sure people are aware of it. And then we can fill out these surveys, and they can, because NASA does actually listen. They're in this room and they're not in all the rooms.
Or even what would SBAG do for you? Like,
yeah,
why should I call in? What is it? What is the purpose?
Yeah, because if you call into a thing that you're not into, but actually listening to the whole thing, you learn a lot here that you don't learn if you're a scientist in a scientific meeting.
Yeah, SBAG is kind of a weird thing, right? Because it's in this weird space between something like DPS or AGU, which is a member society where people pay dues and then they can go lobby and whatever. And we, despite what some of the other ags who don't care about the Hatch Act, when the Hatch Act was a thing, right? We try to be really careful about not, lobbying NASA to do something that, we try to we recognize that there's a line. So what SBAG can do for the community is a real thing, but there's also a limit, right? So some of these things are maybe more appropriately done via the professional societies. And I know we're just brainstorming and that's fine, but it might be at the end we go, okay, SBAG really can't do this thing that we think someone should do, but.
You could have a finding.
Yeah, sure.
Tim Titus, USGS. And there's a lot of discussion going on right now about the early career, but somebody mentioned people who leave the field, fall off the ship, and they're forgotten. I would imagine it is as hard for someone who's left the field to try and get back in than it is for the earlier career folks. So, in the discussions of early career, maybe there should also be the returning career folks, and what unique challenges are they facing?
Could call it something like career development. Sorry, we're now just in full brainstorming, but I think that is a valid point because I have, as I'm a postdoc looking for lots of things to apply to there, I have seen in other countries specific calls for fellowships about if you leave the field for more than a year, there's a specific funding line to bring you back into the field. And I mean, it's primarily, it seems to be used by people who have families who give up, but like those, they actually, someone has recognized it. I think they're usually charities. So it's not always even the government, but it's charities with lots of money. But I think, so maybe we try to keep in that line. Also for what when Andy said, leaving the field, make sure we don't put the early career thing because people leave at various stages for various reasons.
Following up on Andy's comment about the professional societies, I think for the SBAG one, it could be appropriate to have like a meta review of what is each professional society doing and what surveys have they done, and you know, the status of that.
All right, thank you. That was great to, Hannah.
I know. Gosh. Okay, so from Joel Marks, would another parameter you might mention specifically be discipline or field, including outside science and engineering?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, it seems funny to like send out a survey to set up a survey, but you know, we can think about ways to solicit some of the things to ask about.
Yeah, and I would just, sorry, on that thought, with the thought of amateur astronomers, I don't know who's here worked with them, but I've been seeing them called out in some things about doing for actually observations. I think it was in the Harrow one, they were talking about there was a group of amateurs that were actually contributing to it. So that's just.
All right, so some of that definitely went into my next topic as well, but it's fantastic to bring this stuff up, and maybe that means the second section will be shorter. So some of the things that the AGs might support. So the first thing I did was put together a slide about the decadal survey, since that's coming up and on everybody's minds. As our little group of 5, we first thought about maybe the possibility of writing a white paper for the decadal survey, which we still might do, although there is a group from DPS and probably other ones that are already coordinating workforce and diversity white papers. So that would be a question of, is it better to support their effort and have, you know, co-signers and stuff like that versus making one just from the AGs alone? I tend to think that and I'm certainly not a qualified like diversity, you know, scholar to be able to say what exactly the right things to do are either, or things like that. So I tend to lean towards some of these groups that are more specialized in that should be heading the white paper, and maybe we can give them inputs and support. But if anybody has any comments on that, I'd like to hear those too. Another thing I'd like to bring up is that first OPAG and then VEXAG actually made a very specific finding over the course of the last couple of years on diversity and demographics, in which they recommended that the inclusion of diversity and demographics and a survey of workforce diversity issues, and that could be worded to be whatever we actually want it to be, get put into the statement of tasks that's being developed right now. And that Tom said, now is the time to raise your hand and suggest things if you want it in there for the next decadal. And then, you know, a way to get white papers solicited from that decadal on that topic. And another thing that I thought of as I was doing that is we could have a finding that would encourage the diverse and inclusive makeup of the steering group itself and the panelists. It probably is something on the minds of those making those committees, but maybe not. And it could be something that we consider putting out a finding on. And then this is kind of a catch-all slide about some other things that I thought at a higher level we could always consider. You know, again, engaging with NASA to talk about some of the results that they've had from demographic information collected from some of these recent grant proposals. Some of that they might not be able to release, but some of the roll-up studies, at least from the results, that might be something that could be commented on and shared at a meeting like this. Keeping NASA or professional organizations or conferences accountable for the invited speakers and award recipients, et cetera, that we can see on the programs, and making sure, hey, you know, maybe you shouldn't award those 25 medals of honor at this one meeting to the same type of person, right? And I know there are other people that look at that from time to time, but it could be a more organized way to, I mean, it's an assessment. We assess that you are not being diverse in your whatever, right? Exploring ways with NASA or other societies to promote diversity in the community. So some of this could go back to some of the ideas we already had. Maybe that's bigger than the ags, but we can start to make findings or suggestions or work with them to do things like that. Advocating for things like anti-harassment policies for professional organizations and conferences if they're not there, or promoting attendance at an unconscious bias or a bystander intervention training. And then again, taking the metrics of who's already done that and who might be interested would be good as well. And then again, supporting surveys of work-life balance or demographics, et cetera. So that's all that I had written down on the slides. So I want to give people another opportunity to pipe in with any inputs they might have if they didn't already say what they were thinking earlier.
Sorry, early career hat. Do we know if, I don't think there's any early career person on the decadal. Is there any? Oh, okay.
I talked to Lori about this yesterday.
Okay.
I think the answer is maybe they're trying to get some more early career people, but it's going to be probably limited. So like maybe exec sex sort of thing. They said they're trying to go down in terms of career stage, but that's like getting to mid-career, not quite to early career at this point.
Did you ask her about like a designated early career position? And Tom looks like he wants to talk.
So this is stuff that is all very much in the works. And so what I'm about to say, I'm speaking only for myself, my own opinion, not the position of PSD, because this is ongoing. My opinion is that I would like to see PSD press the academies to have more career stage diversity on the central committee of the survey. Whether that will happen or not, I don't know. I intend to make that argument, and I'm sure there are counter arguments to that also, and we'll, whatever happens. But that is in the mix, and I think we're leaning toward trying to do more of that. That being said, the interaction between the agency, any agency, and the National Academies is a tricky one. The academies are a creation of Congress. That's why they are important to the US government. And so retaining their independence from the agencies who are asking them to do studies is very, very important to them. And it's important to the way they work. And so they tend to take the attitude, you just tell us what questions you want answered, we will decide how the survey will be conducted. And we can't step on that too much.
Would a finding from SBAG, I don't know, can we make a finding to the National Academy, or can we make a broader finding that we think this is an important thing? Would that be helpful?
I actually wanted to go back to the other question to make it a bit clearer what Thomas, we cannot tell the academies who to put on those committees. It's that simple.
Do you think do you think the National Academy would read a finding? Maybe my, if it's a no, it's a no.
The SBAG findings, as far as I know, go on the SBAG website. So if people at the academies don't habitually read the content of the SBAG website, I don't think they're going to know about it.
Let's use.
Oh, sorry.
Apologies. I just wanted to make clear also the process for becoming a member of those committees. The Academy will invite self-nominations. They will, and so that's the opportunity.
So you could, I'm just trying to see a way that without telling them you must make a diverse committee, could you suggest diversity has been very important to NASA, as per every single one of these announcements that's come out recently, and we encourage.
Yes. A disclaimer like this has always been accompanied with a lot of NASA announcements. It could obviously also be part of one of the appendices in the statement of work. But in order for everybody to get, it's kind of like a lottery. You don't win a lottery if you don't buy a ticket. So when the Academy announces the chair and invites member of the community to self-nominate, this is an opportunity.
Does it have to be self-nomination? Because this goes back to the whole awards and who gets awards at societies. And if you go back and look at the nominees, they might not have been a diverse set of nominees. And so maybe how do you encourage people to self-nominate to get a diverse pool from which the academies could choose, right?
It's just gonna say also, early career people tend not to, I mean, I think I'm decently educated what's happening like in NASA and how this stuff happens. I presumed it was a bunch of fancy people got chosen by fancy people. And like, so I didn't even know it was an.
But we as an ag and as a community can encourage people to nominate or to self-nominate, or we can as individuals nominate.
Don't forget though, it's a lot of work, which will take you away from publishing papers. So there's a disincentive, there is a practical disincentive, and it's just true.
Does that mean only one type of person is going to nominate? And then we'll get a non-diverse committee
It's
of
like-
people
no.
that just like to work
No, I'm
24
just-
hours a day?
No, I'm just saying it's like everything else in this profession. You have to look at your priorities at the moment and decide what is important to you.
So as SBAG, one thing we can do, I would recommend that we create a finding that whomever is eventually makes it onto the decadal survey committee, representing the small body community, represent the diverse viewpoints of the small body community. So diversity of all the things you had on your first slide. So if we basically ask that our representatives really reflect the full breadth of our diversity, then we somewhat answer that concern.
Okay, any other points of discussion? People can always feel free to come up to me, email anybody on the steering committee to bring up other things. And as we start to actually draft a real goal and get more back and forth with the other ags, we'll keep everybody updated and in the loop so that you can continue to make suggestions and we can make a goal that reflects what we want it to be.
So thank you to Carolyn and thank you to everyone who contributed to the discussion. I'm not sure I ever remember having as lively a discussion for the last topic of the day. So thank you.